Hey everybody, so today I was rolling up my window on my 2004 Saab 9.3, and as I was doing that I kind of heard a big crackling sound and something just snap inside. So I'm figuring that the window regulator has gone bad. So as you can hear right there, there's some crackling noise in the background, as well as the fact that the window's not going all the way up. So there's something going on with the regulator inside that's just not allowing it to move as it should. Now, unfortunately, this isn't the first time I've had to replace the passenger regulator. This will actually be my second time, and I've also replaced the driver's side twice. So I think these are just kind of cheaply made parts. The window regulator that operates the up and down motion of the window. Every time I've replaced it, there's just been some plastic component inside that's failed. So I'm going to go ahead here today and take it apart and walk you guys through how to replace your window regulator. So maybe also you're in a situation where the window regulator on your car is fine. It still moves up and down fine, and mechanically there's nothing wrong with that. But maybe your issue is the window motor that moves the window up and down, that actually runs the pulleys on the regulator. So if that's bad for you, we'll also be looking at how to take that off as well, because that's a step in itself for replacing the regulator. So if that's the piece you need to replace, you can also watch this video to figure that out as well. So as I said, I've replaced both the driver's side and the passenger side. Today we're doing the passenger side, but the process should be pretty much identical, just mirrored for the driver's side as well. And actually, really, this is kind of the same concept used in any car, so the specifics will be quite different, but kind of the concept of how that window regulator works, that'll be the same across any car, if you want to apply this to another vehicle as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get started and see how we can take the window regulator out and replace it. So I'm going to start off by taking this plastic pry bar, and I'm just going to go all the way around the perimeter of the door panel, and then there's some clips that hold it in every few inches, so I'm just going to pop those out of there. So just take it and pry, and you should hear some popping sounds. So you just want to do that all the way around the door. So once the clips all the way around the door are loose, the last point holding the door panel fast to the door, there are two screws behind this handle. So I'm just going to use this, again, this little plastic pry bar, and I'm going to use that just to kind of snap the snaps off of this handle. So that should just come off of there just like that. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead now and use a T30 star screwdriver. That's going to let me take those screws out. There's one in there fairly deep. And then there'll be one more at the top that's a little bit shallower. And there we go. Now we're free to kind of pull that door out from the middle. See, that's really the only thing holding the panel into the door. So now with everything loose, I can just go ahead and pop that door panel right off. So if we look here, there are still some cables and wires connecting the door to the door panel. So we just need to remove both of these wire harnesses, as well as the door release cable in blue there. So just try to get this in the best position you can without putting any strain on these connections. You don't have very much slack to work with. And of course, I did disconnect the battery before I started pulling these wires apart, so you'll want to do the same to avoid any short outs or electrical issues. So I'm going to start by taking off the door release cable. So this little plastic piece attached to the blue cable, that just snaps into the back of the door panel, and then I'm just gonna kind of maneuver that metal piece out of that little loop on the back of the door latch. Okay, now I'm going to start working on the wire harnesses. So I'm first going to take that wire connection apart there. And now I'm going to go ahead and remove these two wire harnesses from their little plugs. So the yellow one on the right. There's kind of a little release you pull back, and then you can wiggle that out of there. That's the release right there. And with the gray one on the left, you just need to lift up on this little plastic black lock that locks the plug in place. And then that should just also come right out of there once you get that free. And then there's just a better demonstration of how the lock works. Alright, so with those plugs and wires disconnected, I can go ahead and start peeling back this foam barrier. You're going to need to peel that back to get to the window regulator, which is inside of the door. So unfortunately, this is kind of on there with an adhesive, so you're more than likely going to end up ripping it, getting it off. But then the plan is just to kind of tape that back on around the perimeter, just to hold it back in place. So just a little demonstration of what the problem is and of how the window regulator operates. Just reconnecting my battery for the moments, as well as the wire harnesses, just to demonstrate how this is moving up and down. You can see the window there is it's kind of clamped in to the bottom there. Those two clamps on either side, and then that is run by the motor right there on the left in the white, and that'll lift the window up and down. So right here, this is actually the clamp that holds in the window on the bottom. There's one actually on either side. So to get the window out of the door, you just actually have to loosen that screw, and that releases the pressure and lets you pull the window out through the top. So as I'm moving the window up and down here, you can kind of hear that cracking sound. That is what's wrong with my window regulator. Something in there with the cable and pulley mechanism that runs it. It looks like something's probably tripped up or wrapped around where it's not supposed to be. So that's what's not letting the window move up and down freely as it is intended to. So just zooming in here on where the motor connects to the regulator, you can see that cable moving, and that's kind of frayed. It looks like it's kind of wrapped up in there in a way it's not supposed to be, so that looks like my point of failure here on my particular issue. So now just after a few minutes of playing around, it's really not moving anymore. It's pretty stuck in one fixed position. Definitely does not want to go up, so it looks like that just completely broke it all together now. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and start disassembling the regulator, and then take it out of there, and then swap it out for a new one. So here, and down here, I just took out 3 T27 star screws. So you just need to get those out to take the motor off. That's the first step in taking that off. Okay, so the next thing you're going to want to do is disconnect the motor wire harness. So there's kind of a red mechanism that pushes into the wire harness. You just want to pull that out, and that should allow you just to wiggle the harness off of the motor like so. Finally, to get the motor out of there, you're going to want to remove the bolt to the upper left with a size 10 metric socket. So now everything holding the motor in place is loose, but before I take that out, I'm going to move down and start removing the bolts for the window regulator itself. So I'm going to start out on the bottom. These are also size 10 metric sockets. So I'm just going to remove the nut from the threads that are attached to the window regulator. So there's one there on the left. And over on the right hand side there's another one. Now, as you can see with that removed, free to pull the bottom of the window regulator around. So with the bottom nuts removed, I'm going to go ahead and move to the top and take those out as well. Okay, so the top nuts, they're inset into holes in the door. But as long as you have a deep socket, you should be able to get them out. Just be careful about dropping them inside of the door. You may not get them back if that happens. Then I'll go ahead and move to the other side of the door and take the top nut off there as well. Now with everything loose, I'm going to go ahead and take the motor off. You may want to use a plastic pry bar if it seems to be a little bit stuck on there. So my motor looks in okay shape still, so I'm going to go ahead and reuse it when I put this back together. But you may choose, if your motor's broken, to replace it with a new one. So if we take a look right here, we can actually see what was causing the window not to go up and down. So this kind of pulley system within the regulator, that little plastic pulley, that's got tangled up around the cable that operates the up and down motion of the window. So that kind of got stuck around there, and the cable was kind of eating away at that plastic. So with that tangle around there, the window obviously didn't work anymore. So that's the whole issue right there. So at this point, the easiest thing to do is just take the window out. That just gives you a lot more room to work with inside the door to take that regulator out. So it should just come right out, just as long as you have those window clamp screws untightened, so there's no pressure against those. You can just go ahead and loosen those, and then push the window up through, and then pull it out through the top. And then just set that off to the side somewhere safe until we put it back in later on. Okay, so now there's plenty of room for me to move the regulator around with inside the door without the window being in there and without risking any damage to the window. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to maneuver it right out of there. It's very easy to get out once the window's no longer in there. Alright, I got my new part laid out here. I'm just going to kind of lay it out how it's going to go in. By the way, you can get one for about $22 on Amazon. Just go ahead and search Saab 93 passenger side window regulator, or driver side if it's driver side. So everything looks good where the old part failed, at least for now. Nothing's tangling where it shouldn't be or wrapping around in the wrong place, so I think we're good there. You just want to make sure you take the little caps off the threads before you actually put it in there. Those are just protectors for packaging. Alright, at this point you can go ahead and you can put your new window regulator in. So I'm just going to slip it in like this. I'm going to put the side that the motor mounts to. I'm going to put that in first and get that set in place. So you just really want to make sure you line it up with the holes that you're going to put your bolts through. There we go, and then once that one is in place, then you can go ahead and stick on the other side. And then from there we can go ahead and we can just adjust it as needed, so then we can get our bolts in place. Okay, so with the regulator in place, the first thing I'm going to do to start reattaching things is to put the motor back onto the regulator. So you just go ahead and fit that in there, just back where it was on the old one. Making sure to line up your holes. And then you can go ahead and start screwing in the screws that you took out. With the screws back in place, then go ahead and reattach the wire harness back to the window motor. That snaps in right at the bottom, and then just push in that little plunger to lock it into place. And then with the motor mounted back on, go ahead and thread on the nuts onto the window regulator through the 4 holes that you took the nuts off of. So there'll be 4 holes on the top left, top right, bottom right, and then finally over on the bottom left. And then just to make sure you forget to reattach the bolt on the upper left above the window motor. Okay, so before we put the window back in and start testing some things, we need to go ahead and put the wire harnesses back together. So just reattach that loose wire and then make sure those 2 plugs are plugged in. You can also reattach your door release cable at this point if you'd like as well. So just take that little metal piece at the end of the blue cable and then loop that through that little hole on the back of the door latch. And then that little clear plastic piece that just snaps onto the back of the door. This may come loose as you're working around with things, so just make sure that it is set in this position when you go ahead and finally do put the door panel back on. So the next step is going to be to go ahead and replace the window. So I just hooked up the battery and put the wire harnesses back together. And I'm going to put these 2 little clamps to hold the window in place. I'm just going to have those sitting there and loose enough to hold the window just at that position. That'll allow me to drop the window in there and then tighten them up and get the window nice and snug in there. Alright, so stand off to the side and then you can just kind of drop the window down into place. So just take your time and slide it down in there. It should go in nice and easy. And then as long as those clamps are opened up and loose, you should have plenty of space in there just to set those in there. So get it in to where it fits nice against the window frame, and then just let it drop down a little bit and set right into those clamps. So then you can go ahead and tighten up the window clamps. Just make it sure that they're snug on each side. There's a nice even amount of pressure, so nothing gets out of place in there. And and then you'll want to go ahead and then just test it. Make sure the window moves up and down nicely while you can see everything and everything is exposed. And if anything seems off here, just adjust as needed before you put everything back together. Okay, so once you have everything reattached with the window regulator and you've tested it, make sure it's working, you're going to want to go ahead and reattach this foam shield. Got ripped up pretty badly just from taking it off of there, just because how it was originally put on. So I'm just going to take some duct tape and just reattach it around so it's held fast all the way around the door. And then just make sure that all of the cables and wires that come through it, just make sure there's enough gaps for those to come through, and then just do your taping around there to get everything set in place. Alright, so with your foam tape back on, you can go ahead and slip your door panel on as well. It just hangs over the windowsill. You just got to make sure you get your lock plunger fitted up through the door. So that's just going to hang there like that. Okay, so once you have the door hanging freely from the windowsill, you can start to go around the perimeter of the door panel, and then just start snapping it into place. You'll hear it click into place. You'll probably want to test the window throughout this process just to make sure everything is still looking okay from that end. So once the panel is hanging freely, you can go ahead around the perimeter of the door panel and just start clicking that into place. You should be able to hear that snap. Once the panel is snapped in all the way around, you can go ahead and put your screws back in on your door handle there. With the screws in it, you can go ahead and take your plastic cover, and that'll just snap right back in place over the door handle. So I had a little bit of tape overlapping from taping on that foam underneath the panel, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut that off now. So obviously, once you got everything back together, the last step would be test your window. So just go ahead with everything back together, move it up and down, make sure everything's nice and smooth. So there you have it. That's how you would replace your window regulator in a 2004 Saab 9.3. Again, this can be applied to either the passenger side or driver's side. Driver's side might be a little bit different, just with the wire harnesses and such. There might be some different ones in there, but the basic concept is the same. And that goes for the rear doors as well. And I would say any car on the road today would probably follow that same general template that we saw here. The specifics, of course, will be different, just in how you actually take the door apart and get the regulator out. But as far as how the regulator operates in the vehicle, that should be pretty much the same across the board. So I hope this video helped you out. Thanks for watching.